In the previous study, I proposed that the two trees in the garden represent the two covenants, old and new. And the purpose of the covenants? Union, reflected by the fact that after God forms the woman, Adam says, "A man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." Of course, this refers to marriage, covenant, and so regarding this, Paul speaks at length about the union of Christ and the church in Ephesians chapter 5, stating, "This is a great mystery." Now, let's go to Genesis to consider more about union. Now, Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain. I've always thought it interesting that the Bible uses the word "knew" to indicate sexual relations or union. Strong's defines this word as to know, properly to ascertain by seeing. For union to take place in a physical sense, the man and woman are usually naked. And it goes without saying that when a man and woman are married, they spend much more time together and experience more intimacy than they do before marriage, not to mention that it usually leads to children. Finally, it must be said that husband, wife, and children form a bond unique to their own family and usually stronger than those bonds formed outside the family. But of course, when we're talking about the family of God, even stronger bonds can be formed regardless of blood relations. When you really know someone, then there is a level of faith and trust that supersedes all others. I cannot help but think of the following portion of the new covenant. "And they shall not teach each one his neighbor and each one his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest." What does this passage imply if not union with our God and Father? No wonder Jesus said, "I and my Father are one." And regarding his disciples prayed, "Keep through your name those whom you have given me, that they may be one as we are." So let's return to the Genesis parable. The Garden of Eden, aka sowing and reaping, and its two trees, the two covenants, where the tree of knowledge represents the old covenant and the tree of life, the new. The purpose of the covenants, union, aka sowing and reaping. Yes, I know, I'm being redundant, but I'm emphasizing a point, which is that sowing and reaping is the most profound principle we can hope to understand, especially when we realize that it reveals the process of resurrection. But there is an element of the covenants which I point out in the previous study based on Paul's discourse in Galatians 4:21 through 31. This must be recognized to gain a full appreciation and understanding of the purpose of the covenants. What is it? Mount Sinai, pointing to the law. That said, let me share some things from Exodus chapter 19, where Moses and Israel first come to Sinai. According to verses 1 and 2, Moses and Israel arrive at Sinai in the third month and camp there before the mountain. Moses goes up the mountain to God, where he is instructed to tell the children of Israel many things, not the least of which is, be ready for the third day. Third month, third day. 3 denotes divine completeness and a complete witness. Coincidence? Not at all. Note the following about the third day of creation. "And God said, Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place. Let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind, on the earth." And it was so. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. What do we see in these passages if not the presentation of sowing and reaping? And the fact that it's established on the third day is significant. I cannot help but think of the third spirit of the seven spirits of God in Isaiah and Revelation, the spirit of counsel. Strong's defines counsel as advice, taken from the root to advise. What better way to advise us than by means of reaping what we sow? Though the law was given to Moses and Israel, the covenants were made with Abraham. And of course, this makes perfect sense, for the nation of Israel sprang from Abraham's grandson, Jacob. Of particular note is the act of circumcision, which Paul associates with the law in Romans chapters 3 and 4, calling it a seal of the righteousness that he had by faith. Circumcision is a perfect type of the Old Covenant and the law. Why? Because it is the cutting away of the flesh from the instrument used for sowing seed. On a side note, it's worth mentioning Genesis 15:7 through 21. God makes a covenant with Abraham and instructs him to bring him a 3-year-old heifer, female goat, and ram, and cut them in half. That's 2 females and 1 male. Might this reflect Abraham, Hagar, and Sarah? Once again, our number 3 is apparent, and once the 3 animals are cut in half, we have 6, the number of man and his enmity with his maker. 3 animals, all 3 years old. 3 times 3 is 9, and when we cut it in half, it becomes 18. The number 9 speaks of God's visitation, while 18 speaks of the bondage of the law. Now let's return to the following regarding Adam and Eve after eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. Specificity. The idea of fig leaves is by no means random. The fig tree typifies the law of God that results from the Old Covenant, while sewing fig leaves together symbolizes the works of the law. That said, consider what Paul says to Peter. We ourselves are Jews by birth and not Gentile sinners. Yet we know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. So we also have believed in Christ Jesus in order to be justified by faith in Christ and not by works of the law. Because by works of the law, no one will be justified. Paul is clear about the works of the law, is he not? Now, let's go to the following regarding the fig tree. Now the next day, when they had come out from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing from afar off a fig tree having leaves, he went to see if perhaps he would find something on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. In response, Jesus said to it, "Let no one eat fruit from you ever again." And his disciples heard it. Now in the morning, as they passed by, they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. And Peter, remembering, said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree which you cursed has withered away." So Jesus answered and said to them, "Have faith in God." Well, one must ask, why would Jesus curse a fig tree if it was not the season for figs? Might it have something to do with the following? For as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. For it is written, "Cursed is everyone who does not continue in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them." But that no one is justified by the law in the sight of God is evident. The just shall live by faith. Yet the law is not of faith, but the man who does them shall live by them. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, having become a curse for us. For it is written, "Cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree," that the blessing of Abraham might come upon the Gentiles in Christ Jesus, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. Do you see it, my friend? Jesus cursed the fig tree to show that as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. But he has redeemed us from the curse of the law, having become a curse for us. For it is written, "Cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree." The Lord's death on the tree demonstrates the spiritual essence of the law, which is self-sacrifice. For love is the fulfillment of the law. This is New Covenant. The works of the law cannot justify us, but love can. In Matthew 11, Jesus says, "Have faith in God," while in Galatians 3, Paul says, "The just shall live by faith." How are we justified? Not by the works of the law, but by faith. Here's the reality. No one is good. Therefore, no one can keep the law, and to think otherwise is to be deceived. But why does the works of the law bring us under a curse? Here's why. You rebuke the proud, the cursed, who stray from your commandments. When those who cannot keep the law condemn those who cannot keep it, it is a clear indication of pride, of believing oneself to be better than others. Might this be the real curse of the law? Maybe, just maybe, the Lord designed it this way, so that it would show that all of us are equal in God's eyes. All are His children, and love will be what conquers in the end.